Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, The Secret War on Cash, where I have my co host with me, Chris Agelastos, and we talk about all various things dealing with or pertaining to the financial system, the financial markets, the dollar, the economy, economies, global as well as domestic. We have kind of bricks. We've run the whole gamut. I mean, we
Yeah.
if there's a topic of interest out there that or at least we find interesting, we want to talk about it. Today, it's a little different because at the time of this recording, I should probably quit pivoting, make it some people dizzy, but um, it is July 1st, so we're kind of on the cusp of 4th of July, which, as everyone knows, unless you haven't been paying attention, that is this year we'll be celebrating our 250-year anniversary as a nation. And
Yeah.
Chris, we had our staff meeting earlier today, and we were talking about how you know 250 years is a long time, but I'm 56 years old, and it's kind of especially now as we're watching World Cup soccer, and you've got all these nations from around the world, many of which have been around for centuries, like 1,000 years, 1,200 years,
Yeah.
perhaps longer. And 250 years with me at 56, from the time of my birth until today, I really only missed out on a percentage wise overall,
Yeah.
kind of a small percentage of our nation's existence. So it's kind of
Yeah.
weird when you look at it and put in that perspective, but 250 years definitely, a milestone. And actually today or tonight, which is why I'm wearing my USA World Cup soccer shirt today. US has a big game because it's a do or die, and hopefully they win. And this, if they do get past this round, that from here on, it's going to be really tough. There's not a lot of expectation that they're going to go further from here. So
Yeah.
a lot of exciting things now. And one of the things I always love about this time of year as well is Wimbledon's going on. So the tennis is really kind of fun to watch. You've got the grass courts and all that fun stuff. We've got barbecues and cookouts that are going to happen. It's a great time of the year. Great time of
Yeah.
the year. All right. Well, what we're going to talk about today, as mentioned, a little bit different. Is kind of looking at what's happened in this country over the last 250 years, and this really kind of, Chris, as I know but for those of you tuned in, is more conversational. um, but really, we're talking about 250 years of American resilience,
Yeah.
gold, silver, and the very spirit of independence that really is reflective of what this nation is.
Hmm.
And as you kind of, and it's really been a fun, exciting, and interesting time here the last several weeks in our country. There's, on Netflix or on network TV, there's just been a lot of shows and programs coming out that are talking about, the great history of, our country. And, as you start looking at these things and going back to the beginning when you had, 56 people in Philadelphia who signed our Declaration of Independence, representative of 13 colonies at that time. And at that time there was a lot of uncertainty, and there were just it wasn't a foregone conclusion that we're going to work our way through this. I mean, it took a lot of
Yeah.
effort, hard work, ingenuity, um, a lot of foresight. And the bottom line is, now 250 years later, we've uh, seen a nation that has thrived, and certainly has come at a cost, and there's been a lot of change.
Sure.
And again, it's at a time like now where we get a chance to you know take a look at that history and soak it all in, and maybe even learn a little bit from it, Chris.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about how far we've come to in such a short period of time, especially when you frame it, like, four of your lifetimes and change, is how long we've been around as a nation. And now, we have become, well, for quite a few years now, right? Probably 50, 60 years now, a superpower,
Right.
from nothing. And from something that that really was birthed to give opportunity to people, and people wanted change, not just a change of location, but they didn't want to be ruled by kings and queens anymore, and really started a fairly new system, and wrote it and built it from the ground up, um, in Philadelphia, just back that 250 years. So yeah, it is kind of crazy, when you think about all of that growth in such a short period of time compared to history.
Sure. Well, and going back to that year, 1776,
Yeah.
um, there was they call it a uh, enlightenment, and there are enlightenment ideals, and burning desire for freedom is how it's been described.
Hmm.
And the Revolutionary War tested every ounce of their resolve, and they were facing shortages of all kinds,
Oh yeah.
depreciating paper currency. Back then we had the Continentals that became worthless, which is where that phrase came from, not worth a continental. And it was through this, I mean, as you can imagine, with food shortages and what was happening
Hmm.
with the currency basically crashing, there was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of struggle. But again, going back to a lot of that resolve, excuse me, that they had for the future and what they were trying to establish. And a lot of people may not be aware of this, but it was because of all that was happening. And going back to the Continental, our currency, our founding fathers, when they were putting together the Constitution, they specifically and explicitly stated that there should be no legal tender out there other than gold and silver for payment of
Yeah.
debts.
Yeah.
And Alexander Hamilton, who was the first Treasury Secretary, established the U.S. Mint and anchored the dollar to, again, that gold and silver, that real tangible value. And they did that in anticipation of, the government. I mean, really, if you think about it, Chris, the government becoming corrupt and overreaching what they were doing and creating inflation and things of this nature. And that's why they put it towards, pegged it towards gold, or with, I should say, gold and silver.
Yeah.
This is something that, as as remarkable as it is, as we look back at our country and just the progress and the growth and what have you, there is another side to that story too. Whereas, now as a nation, we've gotten so far away, it seems, from what
Yeah.
these founding fathers had really set out for us, where we have runaway inflation right now. We have
Right.
insurmountable debt at this point. And, this is where, it's a time of reflection and gratefulness and thankfulness for where we are, but also, my hope would be, and it's probably very idealistic on my part, but that it might be a time too where we as a nation, somehow, some way, we're able to look back and say, hey, let's get back to the way things were, or the way things should be, based on what these founding fathers had set out for us.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is sometimes I feel like you have to get so far off course, and run into some problems and kind of learn some lessons before you look back at history and say, okay, wait a minute, what do I need to be doing here? Because that whole principle of sound money and using gold and silver is really what gave us a strong foundation to build all the greatness that we have in the last 250 years. So you're right to now see how far away from those principles we've gotten, and not to say that the dollar hasn't disappeared, right? It's still very very functional and worthwhile, but a lot of those initial principles, that we used to found our nation, to keep our kings and queens back then, and now here Congress, away from just devaluing our money and printing and spending more than they should, has gone out the window. And I think that's the frustrating thing. As great as our nation is, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I think we do need to get back to those original principles and be more responsible, as a nation, and also as individuals, right? I mean, that's one of the beauties of gold and silver is that as an individual, you still have the freedom in our country, and in many nations they don't. But in our country, you can own physical gold and silver and take control over some of your wealth and have that independence and freedom that helped start our nation 250 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and what I really like about, as we're talking about this as it relates to gold and silver in terms of what, we do here at Swiss America, and this is this aspect of, our country and the foundation of our country, people in our industry and our business, we're very familiar with. But the part I do like about it is that, over the years, several decades now, in talking to clients and prospective clients, where the whole notion or concept of gold and silver, in many cases, I would say really the majority of cases, is so foreign to the average investor.
Yeah.
This just shows you from the very beginning of our nation, this was like the bedrock. This was like the foundation, and it's never changed. The only thing that's changed is what they basically were our founding fathers were concerned about or worried about, and that was that government corruption would, create the plethora of financial issues, which it has. And,
Yeah.
thankfully, inflation, all these things have become a very kind of common thing in everyday life for us. But as we see so many people, economists and talking heads out there talking about or discussing, is the fact that we're getting near to a breaking point because it's just debt that is spiraling out of control. And so my point is, for the average person tuned in or the average investor out there, if you look at this, a good thing to do financially is exactly what our founding fathers had set out for us to do in the first place. I don't It doesn't appear as though you're going to see the government putting us back on that gold standard, but there's nothing stopping each and every one of us as individuals to stopping us from or preventing us from putting a gold standard or a gold backing to our own personal financial situation by way of diversifying into metals. So
Yeah.
great time of year. And I don't know if there's anything else, Chris, that you wanted to add to that, but it's
Well,
happy.
uh,
Go ahead.
no, I do, just quickly. I mean, I think, while our nation struggles financially in a lot of areas, and obviously our dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. But I think what people need to do is look at what central banks are doing, because they're purchasing physical metal, typically gold, more so than silver, but they're doing that to give themselves portfolio insurance for their own currency. And I think the average individual, you're right, they're not aware that they can do that. And even just a modest allocation, just a reasonable portion to kind of back up everything else you do. I think that's one area where we're different than a lot of companies that just kind of want to sell you as much product as they can. We want people to look at more of a holistic approach and just realize that they need a little protection in their portfolio from all the uncertainty, whether it be currencies or wars or inflation and things like that. Just a little bit of an anchor to give them stability so they can build their own financial security like the United States built it so long ago. And hopefully, we can continue and get back onto that path.
That's right. I agree. Well, for those of you tuned in, thank you for doing so. And, this Independence Day, enjoy your time, be safe. Hopefully, you're spending it with friends and family and barbecues and coleslaw, potato salad, maybe some watermelon corn, it's an exciting time of year just thinking about the
It
food
is.
lineup alone.
Yeah, you're getting
So,
me. I'm getting hungry now.
well, and we're right around the corner from it, but I don't know when this will post, but the US
Yeah.
may not be till tomorrow. We'll see what the outcome of the
Yeah.
US soccer game is, the World Cup. So anyway, we wish you a happy 4th, and let this 4th of July be your own personal Independence Day. financial independence, and contact our office. Get some reports on what's going on in the economy, how you can diversify your portfolio into gold, silver, physical metals, and again establish your own independence. And it's very, very important in today's economy and today's current economic climate. Thanks for
For
tuning in.
sure.
Contact us at 1-800-289-2646. You can call or text there, and you'll see also, if you'd like to visit us online, you'll see our web address in the show description. Have a great rest of your day. Again, happy 4th. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Take care.